All right. For people joining the live stream, welcome to a language completeness and consistency meeting about Wolfram Language. We have a variety of topics. Let us start with a random one, about random state. Okay, so random state, wow. So remind me, so random state is basically something that
contains if possible, contains all the seeding information that you can then feed to seed random to completely restore your your results if you want to. And if you look at the example below with OpenSSL, then it says reproducibility not guaranteed. In fact, for OpenSSL, we could say, well, you won't have reproducibility, but yeah, I'm not sure what's up with that broken message. I'll have to test it in an updated build and see if was a build issue.
Okay, let me make a suggestion. Just like in cryptography, where we have that's fine, John, by the way. Somebody's got a bunch of weird background noise here, but okay, just like in cryptography, where we have that kind of bitmap pattern that indicates what the underlying data is, that might be useful here as well. That is, if you've got three random states, you don't know what they are, either that or a hash of the random state or something that shows you which one is which. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Right. So the state may consist of more than one,
I'm aware. Yeah, I'm aware.
The hash of the blobs is the better.
Yeah, the hash of everything that's involved. I mean, we could either call it state hash and then just give it, give a short hash that's about that long. We don't need a giant hash, right? I would just call it method state hash, and then now in this case here with reproducibility not guaranteed, why does it even have a state hash?
No, there's nothing there. So, I men, they're in the same kernel session. Well, so OpenSSL is like, right, there's completely random, right? That's totally outside of our control. For something like MKL, there's some non-zero chance if you're in the same kernel session that it finds via the pointer the right state, but it's also basically there's no real state data in there. So we could say,
well, that's not correct. There is. So for example, with an MKL,
no state data in the random state expression. Is what I'm
correct.
Claiming.
Yes, but associated with that is an address of the expression, which has a pointer into the MKL, and the MKL supports copying the expression, but we don't have a serialization for it.
Why not? Why not just a byte array?
Because the MKL would not be able to recognize that memory again if it were opened again. Now MKL now does support that, but that's a completely different project.
Okay, all right, fine. So that we're still not ready yet, but eventually we'll be able to do it.
Could be ready, okay. Yes.
So I reckon that what we should do, it's method extended CA, fine. Then we should have another great thing, state hash : and then some random piece of hex or something.
Yes, well, and that could be the hash of the expression address in cases where we don't actually have a state.
Fine.
Which
all it's trying to do is tell you if it's the same thing. By the way, I mean, this idea of using a state hash and so on, there are probably other blobs, like for open streams or God knows what else, where having that kind of hash would be useful. We do effectively have a hash for open streams, don't we? We have a pointer location. Is that correct? Somebody know? Itai, you know, don't you?
I don't. Well, right. I mean, we know the stream position.
No. It's something different. If I say streams, oh, it's now just got a thing called unique ID. Wow. Okay. All right. Well, it's just 1, 2. It used to be hex something or other. If I say links, don't I see something like that? Oh, yeah, there we go. Look at that. Name. ADYG blah, blah, blah. See
Right.
that?
Well, I mean, right. That's the name that you could use to connect to it.
Right, but where did that name come from? It's essentially a hash, isn't it? Or a UUID?
Well, maybe John can answer that question, but that's the name that MathLink WSTP reports to the kernel.
Let's see what
Okay.
John is actually.
Yeah, I heard my name mentioned. But,
okay, so the question is, in these link objects, where there are these weird IDs, what are they? Where do they come from?
So in the case in the case of loopback links, I'm not 100% certain, although I can make a pretty educated guess. In the case of the shared memory links, it is basically a randomized, text generation thing. It's just, and that's also checking to make sure it hasn't been used before.
Right, and the underscore SHM is for shared memory.
Yes, right. Yeah. That's always appended for a shared memory protocol. The name, of course, depends on the protocol, because like on TCP, it's going to be port at IP address, port at IP address.
Okay, I mean, we don't need to fix this right now, but one day it'd be nice to sort of UUIDify these things, since we now have this pattern of UUIDs.
Yeah, that would be possible. Yeah. There are some questions that raises, like if I close a link and then open one on the same named channel, is that the same UUID or is that a new UUID? And it's not totally obvious to me, actually, which would be the case.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not unreasonable, though.
Okay. Make a note, but I don't think that's our critical thing for right now.
Sure.
Okay, so here, okay, you can go back to not paying attention, John.
Great, thanks.
By the way, aren't we standardizing on lowercase for these things in blobs? I'm confused by that. Somebody tried to make that.
It's my recollection is that we capitalize initial but not subsequent. But
okay, all right, well, fine. But can we just check consistency of that, because I ran into something recently that seemed to be different from that. Who's PMing here? Sorry,
Devin.
Okay, could you try and track that down, maybe with other PMs?
Yes.
Okay, so method, state hash, and then here, this would be.
Well, if we have state hash, a hash, and state hash not available, I'm not sure we still need that line.
Yes, I agree, because state hash presumably tells you that there isn't I don't even know what reproducibility not guaranteed means, because in a sense, by saying there is a random state, well, what is in there if it isn't something that you can reuse?
Yeah, well, what's in there is basically the method name, the exact method specification. So you can return to that same method.
But not necessarily the same.
Right.
Right. So within the same kernel session, it will return to in many cases, it will, and with OpenSSL, it will not. But with other generators, it will return to the
Okay,
same.
so should there be a state
same
hash or not a state hash in that case? Do you understand the question? I mean, should there be, I think it's useful to have a state hash whenever, yeah, is there only one OpenSSL generator? Yeah, whenever, there should be a state hash whenever you need to distinguish two different threads of random number generation within a single session. See what I'm saying?
Yep, yep.
Okay, so then I think that the only thing we need to annotate here is when
you have, I mean, really what this is keyed off of is when there's state data in the random state object and when there isn't.
I understand, but I'm saying if there's no state hash not available, that's okay. That's understandable. The case is there's a state hash available, but it is not inter-session reproducible.
Correct.
Right?
Right. Well, but I mean, maybe Rob is proposing to somehow add that, but at the present time, there's no way to access. The only way to access that state hash is to save the variable, save the result in the variable, and then dereference that variable, because this is keyed off of pointer equality, right? And if you copy that output into an input cell, it will not be an expression with the same pointer value. So it's a very, very weak form of.
Okay, so look, something like this. Is that useful? To say that in the case where there is a state hash, but another case there's state hash not available. Does that make sense?
Yep, I think that
Assuming we can implement this, yes.
that can be implemented. Basically, what would have to be done is in cases where we don't have a state, the hash would be the expression address.
Fine.
And for those states, we know that method. So then we go back to the address and say, okay, you want to restore that state. It would go back to that address for that. I mean, it takes a little work to implement that, but I think it's doable.
Okay. All right. Fine. Okay. So then, for the method, are we camelizing it like this, or are we? Or are we breaking it apart? I think we could camelize it probably.
Right. So the right. This corresponds more or less to the option values of method, which are documented, which are cameled strings.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. I think it should match the string that you set the method to.
Okay, that's fine. Fine. Okay. Next question. The name random state. I'm a little concerned that is too generic a name, and that we should have something like random generator state or something.
That'd be fine.
Well, are you happy with that?
Yeah, that seems reasonable. I mean, not that this is really a strong point either way, but right, if we called it random generator state, then we could have a $random generator state, and then the obsolete $random state can stay as is for whoever still uses this symbol that's been obsolete for 12 or 14 years.
Yeah, leave that symbol. Leave $random state.
Right.
Without...
Well, it won't look like that.
If I know it won't look
run
like
that in a normal kernel, it gives you some garbage in terms of integers and.
Right. We preserved it as random legacy and dollar legacy random state. But yeah.
Okay, great. All right, so then in order to, how do you localize? Because you use block random to localize nowadays, right?
Yes.
Okay, questions on our live stream. Need a property on the state hash to let us know what type it is. So in other words, you're suggesting that random generator state take a subvalue to be able to query its method.
I think they're more concerned about since they mentioned what kind of hash it is. I think they're more concerned about how do you distinguish a hash of real data versus a hash of a pointer. Not sure exactly how useful that is, but I don't have a.
Well, I think that it's useful to be able to get method there and to get hash there.
Mm-hmm.
Why not? I mean, harmless.
There are different functions that do that, Stephen. I mean, maybe that's, if you want to.
What are you saying? I mean, I'm just suggesting
that if you want to get the current method, okay, the thing you do is just do seed. In fact, we should probably have an argument to seed seed random.
No, it's not a sensible way to do it. I mean, a good way to do that is to just say $random generator state and then take the result and say sub method. Take the result that you've got here, where you can see visually what the method is, but you might want that programmatically, and you can extract that by some kind of method sub value on the random generator state.
Yeah, I was thinking about doing that anyway for.
Fine, let's do it.
With the
okay.
Type setting.
What about states in remote subkernels versus the state in the front end? Well, I think that wherever this is running is where the state in the front end doesn't, we don't even know the front end state. This is not addressing the front end state. This is addressing the kernel state.
Correct.
Right. And remote kernels will have
subkernels, then this would be the random state in that subkernel. If you did a subkernel evaluation.
Okay, so block random, let's, again, we're looking at the name here. Block random, what is the analog? I mean, it's something as weird as $module number, this thing. I think $random generator state is less obscure because, among other things, it's all the randoms flow into this. I don't know. What do we say in the documentation for block random? All pseudorandom generators localized. Yeah, so I think random generator state is all right. All right, everything done on this one? Yep, done, finished.
That's good. I'm happy we were avoiding the backward incompatibility too. So that's really good.
Okay, onward. This looks horrifying, this next one.
Yeah, and I think it's good that we have Rob here this week because he was also involved in this. Right, so we have this list of exclusions, which maybe the problem is that this is overbroad and we need to sort of reduce it to sort of its core things, which are, list representations, patterns, and, I'm not sure how critical interpolating function and various things like that. Maybe Rob has opinions.
Okay, let's be clear what's going on here. The issue is that users are thinking of some head in their world as being purely symbolic and not in need of inactivation.
No, that is not the problem.
Okay.
The problem is the users are reading the ref page and believe that inactivates any head they give it, but certain heads aren't inactivated, and that surprises them.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Which heads are they surprised about?
list surprises some people, although I think
That's crazy, if I might say so.
But if that's because they're not really thinking about the implications of what would happen if list were inactivated. But sort of graphics was the most recent report.
What did they think was going to happen, and what did happen? I'm very confused. I mean, so if I do this, if I say graphics of disk, and then I say inactivate that.
Well, you can't do that. You need to do
they want the input form.
Basically. Right, so nothing happens. But if you do inactive of graphics of disk, then you get a sort of human readable representation of the graphics.
Okay. Great. What's the point here? I mean, the point is the people want it to not work? Did they want the 0 to be inactivated as well?
No, but they wanted the graphics to be inactivated in N of 6.
Do they want the disk to be inactivated? Or is it in fact inactivated? If I look at the input form there.
No, it's not.
Okay, how come?
Because graphics is treated as what's called an expression exclusion. So once you hit it, you skip the entirety. You don't even burrow into it. As opposed to list, which you do burrow into.
Tom and I used to use the analogy of boats taking on water for these kinds of situations where the thing is basically sinking in a pile of heuristics. And it's like, you're pumping water out at a certain rate and the thing is sinking at a certain rate. I mean, I think inactivate is a heuristic function, and that's the way it is, and that's what makes it useful. I think if you tried to make
but the documentation gives no indication.
Okay, well, that's wrong. That's wrong. The documentation should document that it should make some vague statement about how it attempts to do useful inactivation, and that if you really want to inactivate it, what would you do? You would map. How would you do it? You'd do some kind of map.
You could block developer inactivated exclusions.
No. I mean,
why not?
A user level way of doing it, not some kind of hacking.
It's a documented symbol. It has
I suppose you could, but I think it'd be better to give people, if you really want to, decorate an expression completely with inactive. Let me make a general comment here. So we have been planning for the last 3 or 4 years to work in more detail on sort of operating on held expressions. And I think we understand quite a lot more about how to do that. And I don't think we should lock down every aspect of how Inactivate works before we've done that, because I think there may be some small changes that we need. So I think we should just make the statement of the documentation that it heuristically tries to inactivate useful things. We can comment on this. If we want to, we can at least indicate there is such a list and leave it at that. I just don't think, but it will be good to be able to give people something. I mean, unfortunately, there isn't a map head that just goes and decorates all the heads in an expression. If there was
you could do a replace at level -1. 0 to -1, where you do head, H blank of stuff goes to inactive of head of stuff.
But that's if we had a map head that could go to level infinity, then we probably could do this, of wrapping every head in inactive. I mean, it's an operation that is not usually useful. The other possibility is that Inactivate could take some arguments here that determines what it does.
Right, and the exclusion list overrides the pattern. So that's another thing that people confuse. So they explicitly say inactivate list, and yet it doesn't inactivate list.
But that's the only sensible thing, because if
Right.
if the pattern is just blank,
Right, I
you
agree.
just get the default behavior.
I agree. I'm just saying.
Oh yeah, this is an inadequate piece of documentation, right? It obviously has to say that it's excluding certain things. Okay, the question is, if you want to inactivate everything, how do you do it?
Right. If you, so there, on the inactivate exclusions ref page, there are examples of that. So you just block that to empty list, or set it to empty list if you want it to do that. And if you don't want to use inactivate
Okay.
exclusions, then I think that
Question: why isn't inactivate expa comma list? Why doesn't it just inactivate list? Why does it want to go and have a sort of an extra exclusions thing after that?
Right. Well, what if it's list or underscore question mark numeric Q? Right. Should that apply the exclusions or not?
If pattern is numbers, basically. Look, it seems to me that this function, personally, what I would think about doing is something like this. That it has 3 arguments altogether: the expa, the things you want to inactivate, and a list of exclusions. And if you want to, the default list of exclusions can be the one you've given here. I don't know the priority order of the second and third arguments, but if you want to just inactivate everything, you would say inactivate expa, and then blank, comma, and then there are no exclusions. So you get some null list or something there.
Right. Yeah, that's that's possible. I don't think that would even be very hard to do. I think writing the documentation for that would probably be harder than the implementation.
I think it's rather easy to write the documentation. It says that the third argument defaults to automatic, and it uses an automatic built-in list of exclusions, which could be changed by using developer inactivate exclusions.
Right. Well, the question is, should that just be a flat list of symbols, or should it support the more general syntax of $inactivate exclusions, which has 2 types of exclusions?
What are those 2 types of? How do I see that here?
So just remove the first /@ and so that's, I believe, the string symbol and the string expression in the second argument, saying, so symbol means ignore the symbol but burrow in, and expression means once you see this head, full stop and go elsewhere.
Okay, I absolutely think it should support this. I think it should allow an association or something that gives a list of symbols and a list of expression heads. I don't know the correct names for them. And I think that gives the possibility of other kinds of exclusions later. I also think some of the things that are excluded here are bonkers.
Yeah, I agree. This was sort of the last thing we did before we shipped 10, and we never circled back to it. So I agree. This guy definitely could use a fresh look.
Right. Okay. Okay, so let's review the syntax here that we're talking about. Okay, so in modern usage, we would, the common thing would be expa comma all, but that unfortunately would inactivate all, which is very weird and obscure. So I think this is inactivate everything.
Yep.
And then this is the list of exclusions, which should be applied obviously before the inactivation list, because, well, is it before or after?
Well, I think we should maintain the current behavior. So,
well, wait a second. So that means that, yes, it's before, because this would be a match. This would match all. Hold on. So this would be, that's a pattern. What about a list there? all symbols in EXPA. So that could perfectly well be a list of symbols there, which I think is a good thing to have. Okay, and I think it should probably support string named symbols as you get from names as well. And possibly even regexes that involve contexts. The only question is, could it support all?
I don't see how it can. I mean, all would be a weird thing you'd want to inactivate, but it just seems like...
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but all's always used as a terminal, isn't it? It's never...
Unless you've decided to use all as a head.
I won't comment on such people.
I mean, there's a point at which, okay, this is, in fact, I noticed that Ethan on our live stream is suggesting a function called freeze that freezes everything. Good luck to you. That is a very hard problem. Unfortunately, the function that freezes everything, the definition of everything is very hard to make. I mean, inactivating everything is one thing, but anyway, yeah.
Well, I think we should just keep it as a pattern, Stephen, because that integrate sum you could have as alternatives, right?
Oh yeah, that's true.
I mean, instead of using lists, you just have to use alternatives. That's the only thing the pattern imposes on a person.
Well, I know that, but it's look, there's no harm in having it be a list, in fact, because the list it's a symbol, right? Although I admit that we could, okay, it is more consistent to just do that, but we could, as a courtesy, accept a list there, since the list can't mean anything else, since it's a pattern purely for symbols. Okay, so the issue is the exclusions here. The exclusions, I think, are a list or an association.
Right. I think what we could do is, it could be a list of symbols, or it could be an association of two fields, each of which is a list of symbols.
That's fine.
And if it's a flat list, I think the correct default interpretation of those is the symbol type of exclusions rather than the expression type exclusions.
Okay. Let me make a suggestion that one possibility people might want, and we need a syntax for this, is take all the current exclusions and add to it. Right? So see what I'm saying? That
right.
You've already got the default exclusions automatic. I don't really like this way of doing it, but you've got that, and then you want to do some additional exclusions.
Right. I mean, it could just be a binary, a Boolean, right? It could be overwrite default, or include default goes to true false, and I would think the default would be to overwrite the automatic things rather than opting in.
I'm not sure about that. I think people might want to say, in addition to lifting filter data, a very random thing to be put in the inactivation list, they might want some other, a bunch of other things in the inactivation list. In the non-inactivation list, so to speak. I really don't like the fact that we can't have an all as the second argument here.
I mean, I think we could special case it. I mean, I personally, and just map it to blank. I mean, it's slightly limiting, although I suppose we could always, right, you could do alternatives of all if you really, really wanted to exclude the head all, right? I mean, there are ugly workarounds for that edge case if you really want it. So I think
we should support it.
Okay. I personally wouldn't do it, but I can't claim to have a deep objection to it.
Okay, all right. So let's plan on that, and then the question is, how do we represent additions to the exclusions versus overwriting the exclusions?
one comment, we have an excluded forms option. Is it any useful here?
Oh yeah, that's an interesting idea.
Where is this from? I'm not sure I've seen this.
Simplify and a bunch of other places.
Yeah, take largest, simplify. Yeah.
Take largest?
Yes. We use it there to eliminate missings, nans, things like that.
Huh. Boy, something post 12.1 is the calculus of missing.
So
Okay.
this takes patterns, I take it, which is not, I mean, I'm not sure what would be involved in allowing patterns in the exclusions.
Well, I mean, the expression is differential root of blank, 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 right? Versus,
right, versus, is it list or blank list? What is it? I'm not sure what.
I'm not sure either, and I'm not
right,
sure.
But in a sense, right, but in both cases, we're looking at the head, so it's a slightly different.
Yes, I understand. By the way, you've got an awful lot of seashore noise. Somebody. I'm thinking that's Itai.
Yeah, it's probably me.
Seashore.
So sorry.
Okay. All right. Okay, back to this. Oh shoot, we're about to run out of time. Okay, look, clearly a third argument is the way to go with this. I'm not completely sure how to do that. Can you guys have a think about how to do the case of adding to the existing third argument?
Yep.
Versus, I don't quite see that.
Yeah, we you know, I mean, I think between Jose and Rob and I, we can handle this.
Okay, all right. Let's just look at these other things here for 1 second, just to make sure that we. I don't see the need for this. What is the why does
I propose this into that instead of list we can use any head.
Why do we want that?
So I encountered this when working with expressions that I didn't want to evaluate. So I wanted to extract it, but there was no way to.
Right. Well, I think his issue is that he's creating objects which are wrapping naked rules as opposed to wrapping.
No, his issue is that he's creating objects he doesn't want to evaluate, and he is doing. This is part of the story of unevaluated code manipulation, which I consider to be an unfinished story. Mm-hmm. This is a typical example of that, because it's like, when do you evaluate that one?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, clearly you can get. I mean, if you don't want the one evaluated, you can use a : greater than 1.
But you need to extract it, and then it gets complicated.
Why does it get complicated? You've got a list, a : greater than 1, b : greater than, well, a : greater than 1 plus 1, b : greater than 2 plus 2. Okay, so upon extraction of a, the thing is being returned, and then the 1 plus 1 is evaluated.
Which I don't want. I still want to keep it.
Okay, so you want something that is like what extract has, which is the third argument, which is a hold.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a different thing.
Right, and I mean, you can sort of get what Constantine wants now, right? You just need to use replace, right? You replace head of rules with, lookup of unevaluated of list of the rules, etc.
Yeah, there's a different spell for that.
Okay, so the issue is, what would unfortunately now be a fourth argument after the default, which is a wrapping function.
Yeah, that could be true. Yes.
Because that's the analog of extract, which has a wrapping function as its third argument, correct?
Yep.
I mean, that would solve your problem, right, of wrapping. And it seems useful to be able to have a wrapping thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have no problem with adding a wrapping argument to lookup. That may even have been suggested in the past. I still don't exactly see how he's gotten from that need to this suggestion.
Let's not worry about it. We don't agree with this suggestion, but we do agree with wrapping wrapping argument. So I suggest we put in the wrapping argument and be happy.
Okay.
Meanwhile, Ethan, our live stream, is commenting that he has written the freeze function, and he's asking about the package repository, by which he probably means packlet repository. It will not be ready for the 12.1 release, unfortunately. It's still being worked on. And I would strongly recommend that type of function is an ideal type of function for the function repository. You're greatly encouraged to send it in there. I think that the packlet repository, just to be clear to everybody, the packlet repository is for people building whole worlds to deploy in the system that have palettes and redefine, whole contexts worth of symbols and other things that are very global. Now, you can perfectly well, if all you want to do is introduce the function freeze, do it in the function repository. By the way, the function repository can call on things that are in packlets. In fact, we have some examples of that going in right now. And in fact, it will also be able to call in external code and all kinds of elaborate things. But it's still, the question is, what is the exposure? Is it an individual function sticking its neck out, sticking its head out of the water, so to speak, or is it a whole giant armada of ships, so to speak, of complete with all kinds of tooling and so on?
I think maybe you're overemphasizing giant.
Okay.
It could be small, but I mean, I agree, it's a collection of things.
Right. I mean, look, the case that is going in right now in the function repository is something that relies on a packlet that uses library link. Okay. So, that's a different, it's something which just has more tentacles.
Sure, but it potentially has more tentacles, right?
It also will have versioning. It'll be user contribute, pure user, no curation. So it'll be, simply the user packlet repository, and anything goes, so to speak.
There are certain packlets in the layout that are probably smaller than the vast majority of functions in the function repository, because they're really just connecting two things or whatever. But
right. Well, fair enough. Oh boy, I have no idea about this one.
Oh, the tasks should not query cloud objects. There should be a separate function.
Right. So I think this is something that we haven't really thought through. So I'm not sure. We haven't had any prior discussion.
Okay, I have a discussion about it. It seems like unless there was some kind of cache thing that had cloud tasks available, which there could be perhaps, I agree with you that this could be a mess. It probably was not a correct design.
It was hooked up after the design, so kind of without design.
What do you mean?
So the tasks was intended to just give the list of the session tasks, what you have on your computer, and then I noticed that tasks from the cloud were hooked up and documented afterwards.
Okay, so I mean, the question is really, does tasks open close without an or something give everything, or does it only give local tasks?
At least we need a way to separate them.
Yes, right.
I think probably Right.
Much like persistence
so I think
locations.
clearly we need like an all, a local, a cloud.
Yeah.
Right, but it reminds me of persistence locations. I mean, there are task execution locations and so on.
Right. The main question is what should the default be?
Well, clearly not to go off and query the cloud if that's really slow.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Ethan is saying it should take much less than a second to query the cloud. Yeah, I agree. Tasks of cloud is a perfectly reasonable approach and quite possibly what we should use. Okay. At equals. By the way, what happened to Sanders' other suggestion about the very nice syntax for iteration over a association? Is that coming in an ILD meeting soon?
It's on like a list of future topics.
Okay,
So.
fine. We should get to it. It's a really nice suggestion. It will be quite easy to implement. Okay, so
Right. So I don't think anybody's opposed to this suggestion. If there is someone that they should speak up. I think, as I say in the agenda there, I think the biggest issue is what to call this thing.
well, is it really desirable? Is this really desirable? Would it ever be used? Really, really?
So I think there are. I mean, maybe John. Do we still have John? John was a big fan of this.
I didn't propose it, but it seemed perfectly reasonable. Would I use it? Difficult to say without, having it available. But
I could see myself using it more than I've, used some of the other operators we've added recently.
In particular?
Oh, all the composition ones, @* and /*.
Let me tell you something about those. My opinion is that you ascend to different levels of functional programming. Okay? Because I've seen some people who use those all the time. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I am just entering that zone of functional programming where I'm starting to use those a bunch.
Does that mean that you are where you completely grok what a monad is, but you're completely unable to tell the rest of us what it is?
That could be what's happening. Yes. No, but seriously, I think people go through, with respect to things like that, an awful lot of people, it's a big struggle to learn what a pure function is. Once you've learned that, you get those, then you get to, all kinds of things like, fold pair list and things like this, which, people, okay, nest list is one level, fold list is yet another level, then there are more levels after that. And the @ /* are, I won't claim the ultimate level.
And I think, for the people who use those operators, this @ equal would be a natural operator to add, right? Because it means you write B, operator A /* operator B, et cetera, or whatever composition you want on the right-hand side, and then you don't need to repeat.
Well, it depends on the precedence. We have to check that carefully.
Yes.
Can you guys look at that precedence thing, assuming it's @ equals what the precedence would be? I kind of like, in terms of symbolism, I kind of like @ equals.
Right.
I think it has very. It's much easier for me to remember what this would do than @ versus /*.
By the way, there's a people are saying that the tasks of cloud and versus tasks of local and things, that's a somewhat urgent issue for actual.
Yeah, it's not hard to do. It can be for one.
Well, so what do you want to do? You want to say tasks of local and things like that? Well, why don't you guys look at that? I think that's the right way to do it. Okay, but
so in terms of precedence, I mean, the natural thing to compare it to is plus equal, minus equal, star equal, slash equal.
yeah. Who's used star equal in the last? I haven't used star equal in at least a decade.
I've certainly used plus equal. I don't know about star equal, but I've certainly used plus equal. And I may not have used star equal in our language, but I'm sure I've used it in C++.
Yeah.
And if by
the way, you talk about functional programming people, but they're not using assignment. Well, that's not completely fair, but go ahead. What are you going to say?
I was just going to say, if by use you mean reviewed code that had it in it, then yes, I've used star equal in the last couple of years. But it's, yeah, I mean, certainly, right, the precedence should be relatively low, right, closer to equal than to at star and slash star. Maybe we can just, I don't remember if all...
There's a curious division in the precedence between plus equal and equal. There's stuff in between there that you might not have expected. I don't know what the history of all of that is. So between those two, there's therefore and because, vertical separator, // colon, and
// is important. // is really important because that's the question.
And ampersand.
Hold on. The // is the question. If you say x equals y / n, what does the / apply to? Okay. Does it do the assignment before it does the numericalization or after?
Right. And the curious thing is that // binds tighter than equal, but looser than plus equal.
Right, which is perhaps a realization that it was a mistake to have it below equal, or sorry, have // above equal. I'm not sure.
No, it's not obviously wrong to have // above equal. Okay, listen, it needs to be looked at. I mean, I remember the // precedence was pretty carefully thought about.
Yeah, well, and I'm not disputing these precedences, but these precedences were decided long before I was part of the language design, and I don't know what the provenance of them is.
Well, they were in version 1. I mean, the //
right, but so why is // tighter than set but looser than add2? That's not a question that...
Okay, so you're saying that if I do this // n, you're saying that in that case that the n is to the whole expression.
Yeah, well, I mean, triple click the // and you'll see it.
Okay.
But do the same thing with equal and triple click the / n.
Brilliant. That's just the way it should be.
Well, it's not obvious to me why. Maybe it's obvious to you why. It's not obvious to me.
Yes, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because this is saying A equals the numericalized form of B. Okay? Whereas here, you're much more likely to want to say, because this has a return value, because you're using the return value here, what am I trying to say? Anyway, look, we're not for right now. Look, I got to go to another one.
Oh, this parsing.
I think that was an admission that it was more complex than you thought it was.
// thing.
No, it's perfect.
Every time.
Precedences are perfect precedences.
I don't think these were wrong. I wish we kept notes. I wonder whether I still have them.
I mean, you might be right, but the reasoning is not obvious.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, all right, but well, all right. To be continued another time. But clearly, this is not for 12.1 anyway.
Concerning lookup, it's not the full story. I'll bring it up maybe one more time. Once we
Somebody
figure it
is
out.
complaining that A plus equals B slash SM makes more sense. I don't think that's necessarily correct, and I'm going to be forced to find my notes from 33 years ago about why these precedences were done the way they were, which I'm sure exist. Unfortunately, they're probably handwritten, so they'll be scanned, but they're not easy to OCR.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. Thanks, guys. On to the next thing.
Okay.
Thank you to folks on the live stream. Talk to you soon.
Bye.